guys, welcome to another edition of Daily Challenge. Today we have some more sentences from the book Divergent, and as always we are going to start off by dividing our sentences in according to their punctuation. So we have a dash, and remember that the dash is always used in narrative for dramatic effect. In this case we do have a list of things, but we'll get into that as soon as we start to properly diagram this. A question mark, a comma, a period. We also have another period. And look, for the first time, I think, in our videos, we see an ellipsis, which are 3 dots. So I'm just going to do that here, and then another period. So there we go. We have, oh, and sorry, I missed the list, of course, right here. Now, even though you may think, why should I do that? It's just, it lets your mind see how the sentence is broken up. And I think visually you can already start seeing a list here and a proper division of sentences. So based on this division, we see that our first part is the longest part, and then we have some very small, manageable chunks at the end. Whenever we see a very large sentence, for another punctuation, we call this complex sentences, which means that they're not going to be simple, and they're probably going to be made up of more than one clause. And they're going to have probably more than one subject and more than one verb. Okay? So let's just go with what we can see first. Okay? For anybody who's going, oh my goodness, I'm so confused, don't worry, take your time and breathe. We always have these steps to kind of get you to identify what you're having struggles with. And as always, send me your comments and let me know which part is very difficult for you guys to understand. And I'll be more than happy to send a tutorial video or an explanation video on how that part can become a lot less intimidating for you. So a subject and predicate is the second thing we always want to do, and right away we see that the subject starts our sentence. And then we have our first ever subjunctive verb. Remember the coulds, the woulds, and the shoulds right here. Could, and then we have tell. Okay, so we have could tell. We're not going to go into the other words just yet. We want to focus on simply the subject and predicate without anything else. Okay, so abnegation here is just a noun. There's no predicate. Candor, irreducibility, or dauntlessness, dauntless. Those are all just proper nouns. What's the proper noun? Proper noun simply means a noun that is capitalized. Proper nouns have names, places, and you're always going to find them capitalized. So in English, we call them proper nouns. Now, instead is an adverb that starts a sentence or some kind of clause here. And then we have a subject, I, and I have predicate, smile. And look at this, right away we see an and, right? So that's going to connect another predicate, which is say. Perfect. And we got a comma. Not really, once again, if you don't see a subject, just let it go. And I'm going to let this go for now. And then the next one is he smiles, which is another predicate. And I'm not going to touch this either because I don't see a subject and predicate. Well, in this case, is just an adverb. So we're going to leave it at that. Okay, let's go back to our long sentence. So I could tell. Now, remember that tell, verbs of saying, speaking, thinking, shouting, screaming, tend to introduce something called an indirect statement. Okay? Now, how can I explain this? Let's say your friend says something to you. That is a direct statement, right? So in this case, when you say I could tell him, him is not a direct object. It is the indirect object. Okay, so I'm going to circle that and tell you indirect object because you are telling something to him. If I'm saying something to you directly and I'm speaking to you directly, the words that are coming out of my mouth are going to be direct, which means that they're going to be in quotation. So for example, I could tell him, quotation, go home, end of quotation. That's a direct statement, okay? That direct statement is still the direct object of what I tell you, okay? In other words, the direct object of telling is either going to be direct, which is quoted, or it's going to be an indirect statement, which is going to not be quoted. So in this case, because I'm telling something to him, indirect object, whatever I'm telling him, and I don't see a quote here, is going to be an indirect statement. Okay, so all of this here is indirect, which means it's what I could tell him, but I'm not going to. Okay, it's not happening, but indirectly I'm telling you what I could tell him, which means indirect statements will have their own subjects, which is I, and then this is a contraction of have been worried. See? Now, typically, English, especially Old English, will introduce that. Okay, so sometimes when you read, especially those short stories that I've been sending you guys, they're typically Old English, so we're talking like late Victorian, 1900s, 1920, 1930, even up to the 1950s. You would expect to see that introduce an indirect statement. So I could tell him that I've been worried. It's kind of disappointing that that is missing now in the English language, because when I wrote this, I hope you can see how much more clear it becomes, right? That you're introducing an indirect statement versus just not having that there. Okay, so I could tell him that I've been worried. Now, being worried is talking about the subject, right? In other words, it's a passive, right? It's a passive verb that is having its action on the subject because the subject is worried. Now, what is it that I'm worried about, right? So we have that about here preposition, and I'm going to stop before I get to the what, okay? Because we have 4 weeks, again, preposition, object of the preposition, about, and then we have what, okay? Now, what is going to answer what I'm worried about? It is an indirect question, okay? So, in other words, the direct question would be, what will the aptitude test tell me? Indirectly, I'm worried about what the aptitude test will tell me. So, aptitude test, or the test in this case, is going to be the subject. Predicate will be will tell to me, indirect object, and notice where the direct object is. Okay, it is right here. It's an indirect statement, okay? Or in this case, an indirect question. In questions, everything is reversed, okay? So I have a book. I, subject, have, predicate, book, direct object. If I'm going to ask you the question, what do you have? Notice that what is the direct object, which means the book. Do you have, reversed, you subject, have, predicate. When you're asking questions, your direct object of what you want to know is going to come first. And just here, we see the indirect question posed is what? And then we have the subject, test, will tell to me. Okay? And this is what the aptitude test will tell me. Abnegation, candor, erudite, enmity, or dauntless. In other words, when I finish this aptitude test, where will I go? Or who will I become? Perfect example of comprehension right there, because you are able to separate direct statements from indirect statements, direct questions from indirect questions. And again, I'm hoping that some of you will either find this helpful, or if you're still confused about direct and indirect questions, let me know. I'm more than happy to let you guys know, okay, a little bit more about it. Next, instead, I smile and say, that's really good. And notice that right here is a beautiful contrast between a direct and indirect statement. The reason why there is no that, like we've seen here in the long one, because we have a verb of saying, is because there's a quote. See? So this is not an indirect statement anymore. The direct object of what you're saying is right here. Okay? I say, not really. Okay? So, adverb, adverb. Okay? There you go. From our previous sentence, she responds to a question that that was posed. And what was posed before? Are you? Not really. Okay? Worried. Okay? So there you go, just in case you needed context there. And then he smiles back. Back is an adverb describing how he smiles or in which direction he smiles. Well, adverb. Have a good day. Now, here is a predicate, and notice there is no subject. And you may say, well, that's kind of weird. No, it isn't, because there is, and this is implied. It's you. Have a good day. Direct object. Day. Okay. Why is this you missing? Very simple explanation. This is an imperative. An imperative is a command. We've met indicative verbs, we've met subjunctive verbs, we've met interrogative verbs, and now we are meeting imperative verbs. It's a command. If you give somebody a command, you don't have to say you have a good day. You could just look at somebody and say, hey, have a good day. Okay? So 4 different types of verbs. Indicative, verbs that are true. Interrogative, verbs that are questions. Subjunctive, verbs that could be true or potentially true. And then we have imperative, which is a command. All right, let's go to our verb identification here. Hopefully I can get that. There we go. Perfect. And our first verb is a subjunctive. Yes. All right. So we got I is a first person for sure. Singular. Now we go into tense. Which tense could a subjunctive be? In other words, when could I tell him? Is it happening now, or is it happening in the previous? Based on our previous sentence, this is happening right now. We pause right now at the split in the hallway, where we go one way towards advanced math and now we'll go the other way towards history. So it's happening right now at this moment, which means the tense of the subjunctive is going to be present. Now, simple. There's another way of talking about subjunctives, and that is primary and secondary sequence. In primary sequence, we have a present or a perfect tense. Okay. In other words, if something happened just now, my subjunctive is in primary sequence. But if something has been happening, or was happening in the past, we're going to do secondary sequence. Now, in English, that really doesn't matter all that much. But when we're looking at other languages, especially Greek, Latin, Italian, or Spanish, that matters because the ending of your word, of your verb, is going to be different. So primary sequence, and then we have subjunctive. And yes, it is active, not passive. Okay, perfect. Next is first person. I've been worried, or I have been worried, is a passive verb. So first person, singular. Now, I have been is a perfect tense. Perfect. It's progressive because it's have been worried. Okay. It's indicative, but it's passive. Okay. Now, notice this really awesome contrast between the present simple and the perfect progressive. Why is the narrator using a perfect tense? Remember, we talked about the perfect of happening just now. In other words, the narrator is saying that I could tell him that up until this very moment, I have been worried for weeks about with the aptitude test. Now, if I use something like, I could tell him I was worried. That means I'm not worried now. If I tell him I had been worried using the pluperfect, it means that sometime in the past there was a moment where I had been worried. So using a perfect is excellent here by the author, because it gives you that image of the person worried about something up until this moment. And then we have test will tell me. So test is third person singular. It's future. It is simple. It is also indicative. And it's active. In other words, it's not passive, it's acting upon something else. I smile is first person singular. Present, it's simple, it's indicative, and it's active. Okay, and it's 2 times that because we have say right after it. And then we have he smiles, which is third person singular present simple active indicative. And then we have the imperative, okay? The imperative is second person because the command is to one you, singular. There is no tense, okay? In imperatives, there's just no tense. We always assume that an imperative is happening right now when it's telling you have a good day right now. So singular, imperative. Okay, there you go. And yes, it's active because it could take a direct object like we've seen there. Perfect, guys. Thank you so much for watching this challenge. Hopefully it made this diagramming a little bit more, make a little bit more sense. We will keep going with this up until the end of June. We'll see how far we can get with Divergent. And, if you're just new to this, if you just decided, hey, you know what, I'll check out Mr. LG's videos, go back to the previous challenges and see what we've done, because we've been building up this diagramming for a while now. And I've explained quite a few different types of constructions as we've gone. I know this will only help you guys get better with your writing and reading and everything else that revolves around English. Anyways, guys, have a great day. Take care, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.